Welcome to Workshop for Effective Intervention. Hopefully today you'll get some practical, actionable steps and tips to creating a really effective intervention program in your math class that you can do daily. So let's get started. I'm going to pull this down. Maybe. There we go. All right. Our agenda for today, just quickly go through what I will be going through this session. I'll introduce myself. I'll be giving you some information about what makes this intervention structure and model different, and some efficiency tips for how to implement it into your classroom and avoid some of the pitfalls that I went through. And then I'll go through like what templates and freebies that you will get with the freebie that you download at the bottom of this session. All right, so this is me. I'm Casey Travis from The Efficient Classroom. As you can see, some pictures of me teaching. I have been teaching on and off, and most recently on, since 2005 in the middle school and high school math classrooms. My big thing is my relationships with my students. I think that helps me helps me be a more effective teacher, is building strong rapport and knowing my students and my students knowing me and just having fun with them. But I think to allow those relationships to be built, teachers need strong procedures and a well-organized classroom, because I think kids need to feel safe and know what to expect every day in your classroom. And so having great procedures and the students knowing what to expect is very important for learning math. And while I could talk on and on and on about procedures, today's about interventions, so I'm just going to stop there. But if you do want to know more, I have a website that I have written a lot of blog posts about effective and efficient procedures and things that will make your life a lot simpler and your classroom engagement and environment a lot richer. So let's get into effective intervention. I just threw a quote in here because I thought it was really relevant. Struggling in mathematics is not the enemy any more than sweating is in basketball. It's a clear sign you're in the game. While we as teachers understand this and knowing that struggling is where the learning is happening, students feel frustrated by that. And so just really communicating with them and giving them a safe space to know that it's okay to struggle is very important. So as we're going through these interventions, structures, and models, just keep that in mind, that it's important for your students to know they feel supported even when they're struggling, and to help let them know that it's okay and you're going to help them through the struggle and come out on the other side. All right. So what makes this structure different? What makes it different than any other intervention that you may be already doing in your classroom? And you may be already doing this. If so, fantastic. I hope you're loving it as much as I am. Firstly, I love doing workshop, and I have for years been using stations and rotations, and just recently realized that there were some barriers with that, like transition time, off-task behavior, were just a couple of them, and I didn't find it to be as effective as I thought it would be, even though I taught and reviewed and assessed procedures with the kids and felt like they really understood what their expectations were. It just gave an opportunity for students to find themselves off task or in non-academic conversations. And so with this workshop time, it does not need stations or rotations, like timed rotations. Um, Additionally, you can implement tier 1, tier 2, and tier 3 interventions into your classroom daily. And I had never really been good at implementing individualized interventions into my classroom until recently. And I just want to share it because it's pretty cool to be able to have an opportunity to do that. Is this? Okay, so let's get into what that looks like. So John Hattie researches, he's the researcher behind Visible Learning, and he researches factors that are related to student achievement. And he does this study every once in a while and updates it to new data. And so this one, he studied 252 influences on student achievement. And as you can see, number one is collective teacher efficacy. And so just like an efficient teacher, an effective teacher is what I meant. That is important. It has a huge effect size on student achievement. And that's good for you because here you are giving up your summertime to become a more effective teacher. And so applause to you for working on that one. If you notice, tied for number 3 is response to intervention. Also has a huge effect size on student achievement. And so how can we do that well so that we can achieve massive effect size in our own classrooms? So here's kind of what the classroom looks like. I split my classroom into 2 halves, the first half of class and the second half of class. I'm able to do a whole group lesson where I'm teaching grade level content according to my state standards and the pacing guide that my district has provided. And I do a whole group lesson where we are learning and teaching and understanding that lesson, that content for today. The second half of class is where we do workshop. In this half of class, I'm able to give tier 2 intervention where I'm pulling small groups of students based on their lack of understanding or misconceptions from today's lesson. That first half of class, the whole group lesson on today's content, what help do they need to be able to fully understand that, and I can give a more personalized help and instruction on today's content in a small group setting. Meanwhile, they are also working on their own personalized learning plan, and that's where you can give them tier 3 instruction through their, what I call their math checklist. And they can get intervention and lessons instruction that meets them where they are. So if you're teaching 7th grade and you have some students who have not yet mastered fractions, like comparing fractions or adding fractions or any operation with fractions, you could, for example, give them lessons and reteach for them on that specific skill. And so this is great where data comes in and you can see what they need and give them those interventions during that workshop time. I will talk more about the personalized math checklist in a minute, but this kind of gives you an overview of how you can do Tier 1, Tier 2, and Tier 3 interventions in each class period. So what does that look like more practically? These are some possible class structures that you could use. My personal experience in my most recent classroom was that I had longer than 50-minute class periods. And so I was able to do all of this in each day. Of course, there were exceptions for assessments or shortened class periods or just different needs. But for the most part, each math lesson was split into 2 halves. In the first half of class, the students came in, they had a bell ringer, they had been taught the expectation for what happened during that bell work time. They answered their bell ringer, prepared their brains for learning for the day. Then that whole group lesson is where we taught today's content, and the students worked on understanding that lesson for today. You can do that through inquiry and discovery, discussion, note taking, anything that, whatever resource you are using to teach the content. That's when you would do it in the whole group setting. And then students took an exit ticket, and that is where I would choose like a problem or 2 from an essential standard from that lesson. And they would have to answer, and then they would rate themselves on their understanding so I could gain an understanding of how confident they feel. Then you could tell, do they understand what happened in the lesson, and do they feel confident about it? Or do they understand it but lack confidence, that they aren't really sure? Maybe they guessed. Or do they have a misconception but feel really confident that they know what they're doing? Or are they lacking both understanding and confidence? And so that can help you whenever you are pulling your small groups and grouping them based on their misconceptions or confidence level, which is what I do at the middle of the class. I take about 4 or 5 minutes. I pull their exit tickets and I sort them and group them based on what their needs are. And while I'm pulling these small groups of students to work with them to address those misconceptions on today's lesson, for the most part, there are some exceptions where I have to pull small groups and talk about some extra things. But for the most part, they're getting small group help after they've already had the full whole group lesson. And while I'm doing that, the students are working on their independent math checklist, and they are getting their needs met in all 3 ways: whole group, today's content, small group, intervention on that lesson, and then maybe possible remedial or extension activities, because I also had students who were at or above grade level who did not need remediation. And so on their math checklist, they had the opportunity to extend their learning and go above grade level. And so it really does personalize the learning and gives them an opportunity to have content based on their own level. If you teach a shorter class period, this is a little harder to do in one class setting. And so you would maybe need to structure it so that you're doing like a day 1 where it's the whole group lesson and you give the bell ringer and the exit ticket. And then day 2 is more where you are doing the workshop time and you're pulling the small groups. This gets tricky whenever you as math teachers, we all know we have so much content and so little time. And so thinking about giving up every other day for this small group, it seems like a lot. My thoughts are, it's very worth it. But also B, I would take the opportunity to do some condensing where I could, and maybe on that day 1, teach like 1.5 lessons or 2 lessons on that day 1, so that day 2, I could still give them small group opportunity to have a better understanding and get some of those not misconceptions, but those old skills from prior years addressed too. Because we're not teaching 100% of students that are at grade level. I mean, the reality is just some of our kids are not able to access this grade level's content because they're still lacking skills and understanding from prior grades. So reality is we need to meet kids where they are, and this is an effective strategy for helping you to do that. But obviously, this could be adjusted for whatever your own needs are, and how you structure your classroom with, tweaks. That's up to you. And this is just a starting place. So the math checklist is literally a Google sheet that has those check boxes. You can see those colored check boxes, and those are checkable. So the kids can just come in and click it, and so they know that they've taken care of that task. One of the main things that you would, whenever you're giving them a list of their must do's and a list of their may do's, which is how I structure it so that there's always things to keep them on task, is that all of the work needs to be able to be done independently. While you're pulling small groups, you cannot really monitor and help and reteach the students as they're working on their checklist, or it's a lot harder at least. So making sure that it's something that they can be done independently helps just with the organization and the classroom management part of it. Also, having it to be done independently and not small, like if you're having kids work cooperatively, which there is a time and place for that. But during this checklist time, having them work cooperatively leads to like off-task talking and discussion. And so when you're pulling small groups, it's hard to know if their conversations are on task or off task. And so if you just tell the kids it's independent, it helps them to keep their own selves in check, and you have less behavior issues that you need to deal with. I mentioned this a second ago, but how personalized the math checklist can be. So basically, the must-dos are things that I give to them that, for example, we have a computerized program that has taken the students' diagnostic test at the beginning of the year, and it assigns them lessons and review and reteach activities for them to learn at their level, which has been very helpful. And if you have access to a program like that, such as like IXL or Khan or iReady, or I know there's a whole bunch out there that does all of that for you, that's very helpful. If you don't, get a hold of data that is going to help inform you about where the students are. If you use MAPS testing, that is a great starting point for you. And then from there, you can assign them lessons and reteach, whether it's through Khan or an Edpuzzle or boom cards, or there's lots of different ways. An example of, assigning a YouTube video, whatever it is, where they are getting instruction that meets their needs. And I also, during must-dos, I have them do vocabulary based on grade level content, based on the whole group lessons that we're doing for that week. Must-dos, I have them work on fluency. Sometimes our whole group lesson is very broad, or it's that discovery type stuff. And so the discovery lesson. And sometimes the students just need fluency practice with skills. And so that can be a must do, but it's very personalized. And the details, that section right there, is where I tell them where to go find it. For example, if it's a video in Google Classroom that I've assigned to a handful of kids, that's where the details will be. And then the same with the must-dos. I give them options for extension that they can do once they've completed their must-dos. So by having this math checklist, it also allows them some choice They can do their must-dos in whichever order they want. And then when they get done with it, they can do their may-dos in whichever order or choose which ones they do, or not do, since those are all optional. But giving them some choice gives them some ownership of their learning too. All right. So some efficiency tips just to make this easier, better for you, if you decide to implement, is, did I list them out? I did. Firstly, I've said it a lot, but it is really important. Thinking through all of the necessary procedures that you have, and thinking about how we're going to transition from whole group to small group, or workshop time, teaching them very clear expectations for what they are to do and not to do during these times, using timers for the kids and for yourselves, having a timer for bell work, having a timer for exit ticket, having a timer for each small group that you're pulling so that you can get to more students. Timers are very helpful to keep you and yourself, and the kids on task and on track so that you can effectively get through all of the things in a class period. This one is one of the things that I learned from a coworker this year, and it's been so helpful. Printing my bell work, half or quarter sheet to a page, and then back to back with the exit ticket. Just something so simple, but so brilliant. The kids get their bell work at the beginning of class. They work it, we go through it. And then once we've done the whole group lesson, they take it and turn it over. And there's their exit ticket. It just cuts down on paper, and it just cuts down on like transition time of like passing things out or having to go pick up something. Just a small tip on efficiency that made a huge impact in my classroom. The checklist I went through a second ago, but just having something like that is just easy. Like that Google Sheets, I assign it to them in Google Classroom every week. They have one checklist for the week, and that they work on during workshop time, and then they submit it at the end of the week, and I can go through and check what they've done. Just made it really simple and efficient, and it just kind of took the burden of like, wow, I've got to do small groups, and I've got to do all these interventions, and I've got to meet all of these kids where they are. The checklist was just an efficient tool for facilitating that. GoGuardian. I know most of you probably use it, especially teaching through COVID. GoGuardian was just really helpful during that independent checklist time, because I had a few students who would try to they just fake that they're on task, but while they were doing that, they were playing unblocked games or just doing off-task stuff like emailing other students. And so having my GoGuardian open at my table while I'm pulling small groups and just occasionally checking on it to make sure that students are on task, even the kids just knowing that I had it open, kept them in check, and they were more likely to be on task. And I didn't have to worry about them being, their computer not facing me, or me having to get up and monitor behavior while I'm trying to do small groups. So GoGuardian was just an effective tool for monitoring their computers while I was trying to pull small groups. And last efficiency tip was just dry erase boards. Most of us have these and use them well. I found them to be very effective during small group time because I didn't have to bring paper and I didn't have to have printed out sheets for them. I did sometimes have that, but that just let them work on their whiteboards, and it saved time because it's a lot easier to erase a whiteboard quickly than trying to pass out new sheets to every student and collect them back whenever I when it was time to pull another small group. So dry erase boards were just very effective. And the last thing that I have for you is some templates. If you click the download at the bottom of my session, you will get a free resource. And in that, I have basically done like a PDF explanation of tips and implementation strategies for how to do these effective intervention and workshop well. In addition, I've given you some templates to bell work and exit tickets, vocabulary graphic organizers. What else? Oh, I've given you the template to the Google Sheet for the checklist so that you can just take that and implement your own and then just make a copy and then just assign it to students for your Google Classroom each week. I've also prepared like a list of ideas for checklist so that you're not starting from scratch on what you're putting into your checklist for students each week. You've got a starting point for you and just some other actionable things that might be helpful to you. All right. So definitely check that out. And lastly, thank you again for coming to my session. And you can check me out on theefficientclassroom.com or send me an email if you have any questions or thoughts. Have a great day.